even if the current business plan, even if the current business model is not that strong, even if the pitch has not been super strong, to have rather a more positive tendency to say yes, even if the odds are still a little bit against the women. Because at the moment, women need to extremely overperform in pitches, in their presentations, to showcase like, I can actually do it, because investors have a bias. And so men are starting here and women start here. So you need to overperform to get it to a yes.
The journey from school to startup is rarely linear. It can be messy, surprising, and sometimes completely different from what people plan. That's what makes it interesting. And today's guest has a front row view of that journey through teaching, research, and entrepreneurship herself. Welcome to another episode of School to Startup, brought to you by Tracxn, a private market intelligence platform that's been supporting the global university ecosystem for over 12 years. Through our university partnerships, we work with institutions driving innovation and entrepreneurship, and this series highlights the academic leaders making that happen. I'm Harish, your host today. I'm delighted to be joined by Alisa, Associate Professor of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at ESCP Business School. Alisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm super happy to be here and honored that you invited me to participate.
Great. I'll start easy. When someone hears Associate Professor of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, it sounds very polished and impressive. But behind that title, what's the real story? How did you get here?
Okay, this is a very dangerous question, because I could talk for hours and hours and hours to tell a little bit about my story. But of course, to keep it in a way short and sweet, it's actually more of a few coincidences that has brought me to where I am. So I never actually in the past had this big dream of saying, wow, I'm waking up one morning and I want to do and pursue the academic career. Never. But what has happened is that I had the kind of great opportunity right after my master degree to start a PhD with a specific focus on entrepreneurship in Africa. And in this specific moment back then, 2015, I had never been to the Africa continent at all. So not even North Africa, not South Africa, nothing. But this opportunity to better understand entrepreneurship as a real angle, how to understand, to unlock the local potential, unlock economic development, and improve equalities at a global scale, really got my interest. And so that was basically one of the biggest decisions I had in the past, saying yes to this opportunity, despite kind of my lack of experience and knowledge, what will actually kind of happened to me afterwards. And since then, I just got kind of into the loop. I love the topics. And then, honestly speaking, being a professor is kind of just a natural consequence out of the research activities and the personal interests that I have. So actually teaching entrepreneurship and being a professor is more like a kind of byproduct and a consequence, rather than, let's say, the prior goal and objective that I had in mind. Which, of course, does not mean that I don't enjoy it. It was just, let's say, just a natural flow that then this would be kind of the profession or the role that I can currently have.
Very interesting. You teach entrepreneurship, research it, and you have also founded a startup yourself, right? So do these three identities ever clash, or do they actually make each other stronger?
I'm kind of laughing because they are clashing, yes, but the clashing just means in terms of time. Because as you can imagine, one of the biggest challenges is to do all of those things within the time constraints that we all have, which is a day has 24 hours and a week has 7 days. So that has been my biggest challenge. However, this challenge I'm trying to reduce more and more, because the beautiful thing is that with every year on top, the different angles, as you were saying, research, teaching, and my own entrepreneurial activity, they are strongly intertwined. So every activity is kind of feeding and fueling the other activities and creating synergy effects. And so let's say the most struggling part, which has been, of course, the setup and the early stage, is kind of finally over. And now I can see that there are a lot of synergy effects. So that helps me in order to keep kind of my time management for myself. But yes, of course, sometimes there are some clashing moments.
Amazing. So your research has looked closely at entrepreneurship in emerging markets, particularly places like Kenya and South Africa. So what first drew you to these ecosystems?
Okay, in the first place, the first country and city where I went during my PhD was in 2016, Nairobi/Kenya. And that, again, has not been really my personal, let's say, decision. It was a more, how can I say it, organizational and operational decision. In other terms, it was basically the city where we had most connections, where it felt most safe. And so that's how I started. And then it all happened, like, you never know, but with some cities you have a certain feeling. And I personally have a very strong feeling when it comes to Nairobi, because now I've seen Nairobi over the past decade, so a long time, 10 years. And it's just growing every single time. You see the city in a different shape. You see things that are new. It's evolving. It's changing. There's so many things that are happening. So it's just a wonderful playground for entrepreneurship. And of course, for me, being a scholar and by nature being super curious, that city is just amazing. So it has been first, again, kind of more like a coincidence, but then I kind of fell in love. And then it's just like the personal feelings and impression out of the city. And you can imagine, after 10 years, of course, you also develop strong relationships. You have friends that you know over the past 10 years, entrepreneurs that you have seen growing, quitting one startup, opening another one. So that's why there's just, let's say, apart from the economic development, there is a personal attachment to the ecosystem around Nairobi. The second part, which is South Africa, is again more like a coincidence, because there are personal connections, especially with some of the colleagues from the University GIBS. And so that has kind of got me into the South African context as well. So as you can see, for me, it is a mix between, there is a potential for research and interesting things are going around. But as you can imagine, basically in every city, in any emerging markets, a lot of interesting things are happening. The second really, really important element for me is that there are personal connections that allow you to have a certain access to see the real development and to really have interesting conversations.
Very interesting. And a major part of your work focuses on women's entrepreneurship, right? So when you look at the current landscape, what are the biggest barriers women entrepreneurs still face?
The biggest barriers for women, I would like to divide it between internal and external barriers. And let's maybe even start with the internal ones. So what I can unfortunately see, and I personally, I'm a woman, I also try to build up an entrepreneurial activity, so I can also talk about myself and not blaming others. It's this constant struggle to really identify yourself as a founder, as an entrepreneur, as a leader. And I can give you a very easy example. I don't know how many times I talk to new female founders, and I know that they are female founders. I know that they have at least one amazing entrepreneurial activity. If they introduce themselves, usually they say their name, saying that I'm Maria, I'm mom of 5 kids, I'm a wife, I'm a da-da-da. So there are a lot of roles that they're saying. And then at the final end, they're saying, and I'm the founder of the following business. And I mean, this comes very natural, but it shows in your mind how much or which order your role as a founder has. Because we are talking in a setting, of course, where we want to get to know to each other, but of course they know that the topic is entrepreneurship, it is business. And this is a continuous struggle, because if you don't embrace that role, you're not behaving in certain situations like you own it, it's your thing, and you believe you are worth to be the leader, you are worth to get the funding, etc. So this is really one challenge that we can see. And of course, there are a lot of reasons for it. It's not like to blame each individual woman, but the reason is very complex, because part of it also that you can always hear, one of the issues is that they're telling you, especially here in Africa, women don't own their time, because there are those additional society expectations. And so for that reason, for instance, they are actually telling you that they're the wife, the mother, because that's what they first need to cover. And only if all of those things are covered, they actually have the beauty to dedicate their time to business. So that's a continuous challenge. The external one is unfortunately driven by the ecosystem, which is still very biased against gender, against women. So unfortunately, just last year, when we had a wonderful event in September with more than 80 female founders in Nairobi, you cannot imagine how many stereotype examples we got in the discussions. So to make it very concrete, even though legally it is not allowed, but still they're telling you whenever they want to apply for a business loan in a bank, it might not happen always, but every now and then they still get asked, is your husband fine with it? And one of the founders said in front of everyone, honestly, I don't even be married. Why should they ask me? And so those are just a few examples. Again, they're not happening always, but they're still happening. And as they're still happening, if it's happening in the banking industry, it happens also with VCs, business angels. So another challenge is this cultural change that we need to finally get happen, that is not happening. And so there is an ecosystem that is not in favor for women.
Very interesting. Zooming on universities, if university incubators or startup ecosystem had to stop doing one thing and start doing one thing to better support women founders, what would your answer be?
Very challenging to pick one. Honestly, I think it would be fantastic to have, how can I express it? It's more like a natural trust that women can do it. Even if the current business plan, even if the current business model is not that strong, even if the pitch has not been super strong, to have rather a more positive tendency to say yes, even if the odds are still a little bit against the women. Because at the moment, I believe it's exactly the opposite. Women need to extremely overperform in pitches, in their presentations, to showcase like, I can actually do it, because investors have a bias. And so men are starting here and women start here. So you need to overperform to get it to a yes. Versus what I would like to see is actually that we're not sitting here, we're starting here because there is a general over optimism to say like, no, women can actually do it. Because we do have evidence, slightly evidence, showing that if you invest in a woman, especially in emerging markets, it actually giving time, she is using usually the money wisely. So I think there should be more like an easy trust, saying like, yes, we should not think about it twice. Let's support them, especially financially speaking.
Interesting. So how does ESCP create an environment where any student are encouraged to experiment, build, and maybe fail a little without feeling like everything is on the line?
Can you maybe rephrase the question? So just to really understand what you would like to kind of hear as
right. I wanted to understand how is ESCP doing in terms of fostering the entrepreneurship.
Okay, yeah. I can speak for myself in terms of how I personally teach entrepreneurship. And of course, it is more than hands-on. It is not about case studies. It's about every single entrepreneurship course that I teach. Everyone needs to become an entrepreneur if they like it or they don't like it. So they're actually starting to experience elements of this entrepreneurial journey, apart, of course, with the fact to match them with other interesting founders so that they actually get closer to the ecosystem and see that behind all those wonderful stories, they're all human beings with failures, fears, and a lot of, let's say, roller coaster experience. So this is a really important part. And maybe again, connecting to the more female lens, I truly believe being a woman, but also trying to really balance equally as much as possible, or even overly showing female founders is helping a lot. So I usually can see that I have a lot of female students in the programs, especially if they're electives. There are quite a lot of women now, especially in the bachelor degree, taking the elective of entrepreneurship. So I can see that there is a growing interest, but I think it also helps to showcase upfront already that this is a course where also female voices are heard, to be more inclusive also in that environment, and to allow them to have already experience to see that women can do it no matter at which age and with which type of family planning in the back.
Very interesting. Before we wrap up, for students, early founders, and even young researchers trying to find their own path, what advice would you leave them with?
The guidance is, how can I say it? In the end, it's very easy or simple what I can suggest. And in the end, it really comes to the point to be just curious. Because in the end, if you're not curious, I mean, you can only be curious if you have a certain interest. And that is already the first starting point where, it's not that easy to be curious, because in the first place, you need to understand what are your interests, what are your passions, like what is getting the inner flame in you, like burning. And this is what I can see is also the challenge with the students, especially if they're forced to do a course, because you can't really teach and give them an entrepreneurial experience if they have not the kind of inner activity saying like, yes, I want to do something. This is where I burn for. This is what I want to do. So it all starts with this curiosity to have something where you get passionate, curious about, and then you can never stop being curious, because it's not only about learning and keep moving, but because you need to learn so much, you really need to have a very strong inner motivation and curiosity to keep your energy going, and again asking questions, talking to people, moving around, exploring different options, learning, trying things out, failing, etc. So my suggestion is, in a nutshell, be curious, but in order to be curious, you need to really understand what is your interest, your passion, your curiosity. And this, of course, then is again also connected to a broader topic, which is like, which impact, which contribution would you like to have in your life, and how do you see yourself in terms of which impact you would like to create for the society where you are in. So it is actually a big challenge to get to the curiosity level, but I think this is the starting point in order to have some guidance if you really want to build up an entrepreneurial activity, because we all know it is not an easy journey.
Amazing. And where can people follow your work, your research, or anything exciting you're working on next?
Of course, there are a lot of different, let's say, activities and projects that I'm doing. I try to have a portfolio which is a mix between pure scientific work, which normally no one else is reading apart from us scholars, but then of course also trying to make like a transition into what are the practical implications and how can we actually talk about it with the broader community. So the easiest things are actually, I do have a website. It's always updated about the recent reports or publications that we did, especially the ones that are a little bit more practitioner oriented. And otherwise, I'm of course very open for any conversation and relation, especially over LinkedIn. So I think those are the easiest two channels to see what's going on and what are the projects in the pipeline.
Perfect. All the links will be available on the comment section. All right, Alisa, thank you so much for being part of this episode. This was such a wonderful and thoughtful conversation. In this conversation, we explored how entrepreneurship grows through context, resilience, and real-world problems, and also how education can play a meaningful role in shaping future founders. Thank you very much for being part of this episode again.
Thank you. It was super nice talking to you.
Great. And to our viewers, if you have enjoyed this episode, do like, comment, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for watching.